better? Okay. Very well, warm welcome to all. Good morning. Can we just open the chat for a moment, Gaurav?
Sure.
Okay. And can I see the chat? More, it says chat. Right. Why can't I see the chat? All touch. All touch. All touch. All right. I'm not able to see the chat somehow. Participant, you're sharing remote control, optimize, share for full screen.
Click on more and then you will able to see the chat option.
Yeah, I can see that. Can you see on my screen? I've opened this thing, and but I'm not able to see where people are chatting. Maybe somebody can just chat. Maybe some pop-up will come.
Yeah, people are
Saying
just saying, yeah, it's coming. Messages are coming.
They are coming. Okay, let me see if there is anything else which is coming. Chat, recent. No. Okay, great. New security participants. I can see participants now. Right, I can see the chat. All right, great. So I can see the chat. Well, once again, a very good morning. Sorry for the technical glitch. In the previous slide, I tried to show you a structure over there. So we will do a quick rapid fire round question here. Whenever we open the chat and whenever I say stop, then just stop writing. So the first rapid fire question is, what was the structure that you saw in that first slide? It's a fort. Stop. Okay, great. And in that structure, where do you think that structure was situated? What was it in a ground? Was it on top of a hill or like what? On top of a hill. Great. Stop. Okay. Second question. Third question is, why does this fort have high walls? Security. To secure what? What do you think is the critical asset this fort is trying to protect? King, yeah, king, royal family. Excellent, excellent. Okay, there was a back door also in that fort. Why do you think there was a back door? To escape, emergency escape. All right, excellent, excellent. Okay, I also showed you a news item. Did anybody notice what that news item was all about on the left hand side? Robbery in Vancouver, right? It was a store break-in. Excellent, excellent. And one of the suggestions given in that news item was that there should have been outdoor lighting. Do you think outdoor lighting would have helped to, to probably, that situation would not have happened if there was outdoor lighting? Excellent, excellent. Great. All right, stop. So I will close the chat. See, this tells us how important physical security is. But you might be wondering what a CISSP professional has to do with physical security, right? We are all information security, IT background people, and probably physical security is the job of the guys who construct our building, like builders, architects, no? Well, it's not only their job actually. It's our job as well. It's our responsibility too. And let's see why and how. My name is Rajiv Gupta, and I'm quite privileged that I'm going to take up today's session on physical security in digital era. Gaurav has already introduced me. I have a very mix of experience over 27 years, with last 5 years I switched my career into auditing. Before that, I was into operations for 8 years. Before that, I was into sales and marketing. 3 years I was into training and mentoring and performance coaching, and then 12 years before that, I was into sales and marketing. So, a lot of history around me. That's my LinkedIn URL in case anyone wants to connect. Let's move with today's session. So I think everyone knows about cyber threat. From my end, I would say that though cyber threat says it's an enterprise risk management community, which is a very common term, I would say this community is unlike any other that I have seen in my brief career in audits and compliance. And I think the way this community has come together with people, with a team like Gaurav, Varun, Mohini, and others, and the excellent combination of the mentors, faculty, which has come up for the CISSP session. And I would also like to mention the people who are joining as students or learners on this particular session. This is my first experience, and the kind of synergy, the kind of knowledge sharing that I have seen on this particular group is absolutely unique. So I'm quite privileged to be associated with cyber threat. So now these are very tough times, right? If these tough times today, as everybody knows, right, with Corona pandemic, if it can teach us anything, it's how to run a business as efficiently as possible. And I thought of including this quote from Benjamin Franklin. People might know him as the founding father of United States. He was a scientist and an inventor. Today's topic is actually very vast, and I must tell you that each topic has its own standard. When I say topic, the terms and things and sections that we are going to see, because I did a lot of Google research, everything on this session I have taken or learned from Google. I have taken a lot of imagery, quotes, and everything from Google, and given it my own flavor. But as we have heard from our previous mentors, that CISSP is a mile long and an inch deep. I will try to sail you through as much as I can. So with so much at hand, I have tried to give it a structure, and this is how I aim to cover it today. The first section will talk about how to choose a site in such a way that it is secure naturally, and do the assessment of the physical security around that site. The site can be the plot, and then how to construct that building over on that particular facility or site. Then we will talk about physical access controls around that site, what controls we can put up. Now, as we all know, that physical access control are non-technical as well technical in nature. If not, then I'll try to cover as much as possible. Some technical controls we will take up. And then environment and life safety. See, the whole aim of physical security is to protect the organization from unauthorized access. The controls that we will see today should limit the access to only authorized individuals. Authorized, when we say, which are authorized by the management, who are authorized to access the critical assets. And everybody probably now know till by this time what is a critical asset. It can contain information which can prove detrimental if falling into an unauthorized intruder's hands. So physical access issues are a major concern all over the world today, because they can cause, if we don't implement physical controls, they can cause unauthorized entry. It can lead to damages, vandalism, or theft. People can copy sensitive information. They can alter some sensitive information. The sensitive information, if taken out of our premises, it can be publicly disclosed. It can be abused. So a lot of things, a lot of damages or threats are circling around in our external environment, and we need to protect ourselves from those threats. So physical access control, when we talk about physical access, we are going to talk about campuses, buildings, rooms, floors, etc. Because logical access, as we have seen, it limits our connectivity to the computer networks, system files, operating system, data. if you might recall, there was a session on IAM by Shweta Tripathi and Priyanshu Khandwala, and we talked about access controls, logical access controls to protect our assets. And there they mentioned that facility is also an asset. So we also talked about the CIA triad, which is nothing but the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Till now, we have seen intruders coming through ports, firewalls, and other logical vulnerabilities. But today we are going to look at physical security, where intruders might access or try to breach our walls, windows, doors, locks, and what all measures we can have in place to save us from these particular threats. So whatever we thought was left to the imagination of our construction contractor, we are going to look at them today. So some of the terms you on the screen, this word cloud that I have created from one of the applications on online, humidity, masquerading. These are some of the terms you might be aware briefly already. Some of them you might not be, and many others are there which I could not fit on this could not fit on the slide due to there are so many of them you would not have been able to read it. So now before we jump into finer details, remember that physical security is part of information security. So the whole topic that we are covering here is CISSP, which says Certified Information Security, Information System Security Professional. So it's a part of the entire information security network because it protects all the three facets of the CIA triad, as you can see here. It protects the availability of the assets. It protects
Rajesh, just one feedback. If you can just set your mic, it seems like a lot of air is coming and distortion.
okay, let me try to put it here. Is it better?
Maybe I'll just give you the feedback if that's okay.
Right. Maybe I should switch off the fan, huh? Okay. So the information, the CIA triad, it protects the availability of the assets, it protects the integrity of the assets, and of course the confidentiality of our data and business processes. Okay. So a trick question before we move
I
on.
think it's getting increased while you're speaking. Maybe I can open chat. So, guys, you are also feeling the same way? Yes. So maybe if we want this session to go good, I think some fixing. Uh, that's quite good.
So let me say speaker. Okay, how is it now?
I think same way.
Oh, sorry. Wait, what about now?
Cracking sound is gone, but it seems like yeah.
Better?
Yep, better.
All right. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Thank you,
Sure.
guys, and sorry for this glitch. As I was talking about two things, there are two concepts here that I want to bring about. One is safety, another is the security. So basically, when we talk about safety and security in our daily life, we probably might be using these terms interchangeably, but actually, safety and security, if you see, it is very much different. So, for example, we say safe travels, right? We never say have secure travels. And then we say, for example, let's say laptop, we say secure your laptop. We don't say safe laptop. Uh, Basically, safety, when we talk about it is talking about anything which has a trigger like earthquake, floods, fire, something which is natural, and security has a trigger where somebody has a malicious intent. So a human is involved here in security piece, and to protect from any human malicious intent like espionage, sabotage, theft attempt. As you can see, you have security guards, you don't have safety guards. And this bulletproof car is basically meant for your uh, safety. It means it is meant to keep you secure. So these two concepts I wanted to just bring clarity before we move on with our next portion.
Okay. Layered defense model or defense in depth. When I read about defense in depth model, I was immediately reminded of Mahabharat's Chakravyuh, where Arjun's son Abhimanyu got trapped and he was able to penetrate through these lines, but he was not able to come out. Right? I'm sure people would remember that. So defense in depth or layer defense model is nothing but it is a similar kind of a Chakravyuh which has to disallow entry to any intruder in the first place. It should, that means the intruder should not be able to penetrate this Chakravyuh or this model from the last parameter or the zero level parameter that he faces. And even if he is able to penetrate this model or this layers of defense somehow, then the second objective of or the intelligence in this Chakravyuh is that he should not be able to come out. He should get trapped inside. So if I show you this today's analogy, you can see here, you can easily make out the comparison on the superimposed graphic of the modern security architecture. Each layer in itself is a control, and on each layer there are more controls to compensate together for the overall security of our information assets. In fact, from exam perspective, if it is asked, layer defense is an example of compensating controls because it cannot act as in isolation. There, it's a mix of controls to compensate each other and work together. Okay, so let's make use of the chat. I will show you 5 types of control here. When designing the physical security for an environment, we have to look into, or we can broadly classify the controls as deterrent controls, which deter you to enter into the premises. Then there is denial, then detection, delay, respond. They are all English words. Deterrent means, one should not be encouraged. One should feel afraid of entering the facility. Denial is even if one is encouraged and he tries to enter the facility, the control should deny the entry. Third level is that in case the denial is breached, then there should be some control which can detect the entry of the intruder and send a signal somewhere or raise an alarm. Then after detection, if the intruder is trying to reach the most critical asset, there should be some delay mechanism so that the people who have received the alarm, they are able to take some action and hold the intruder in place. He spent some time. And fifth is respond in the sense that there should be some sort of mechanism which can probably respond to the intruder, and we are going to look into that. So into the chat, what is the control that you're seeing which can deter a particular intruder? Okay, let's see, chat. Let me see if I can see the chat. No, I'm not able to see the chat. Participant. Okay, now I can see the chat. Signage, lighting, CCTV. Okay. Yes, signage is definitely deterrent control. Very right. Which control do you think will deny if the intruder is trying to still enter? Which is going to deny? Security guards. Security guard. Okay. And even if the intruder is able to bypass the security guard, or he's in a vicinity where the security guard is not there, do you think are there any controls which will be able to detect the movement? CCTV cameras, right. Electrical access controls. Okay, we will talk more about them. Good. Okay, any controls you can see here which can delay the intruder? Fencing, yeah. Access control. Okay, yeah. Yes, there are certain, we can have strong doors or maybe some electronic access controls which can, where the intruder has to spend time in terms of figuring out the pin, so it can delay. Excellent. Okay, last but not the least, which control is the respond control here? Who do you think is going to respond? Control room security guards. Excellent, 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 excellent. Okay, okay, okay. Let's stop. Let's stop. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So it is common for an organization to have situations when all these existing controls still put together are not adequately able to, detect a security breach. So hence the reason that there are so many, it's a vast field, and we are going to see that whatever is mentioned in all over Google, there are still technologies and controls which are going to come into the digital era, especially post-COVID, because some of these controls during the COVID and due to the COVID-19 virus are probably not going to prove as sufficient to be able to safeguard your critical assets. Okay, we have a quiz now, and let's say you are in charge of implementing your perimeter security controls and for your office in an office park in campus, and the risk analysis that you do, it indicates that your company would need to employ fences. Okay, this is the first thing that you are going to work upon, fences, and it should deter the casual intruder. So which option would you choose? Now, fences come in various sizes here. The 4 options that are given here are like this. Let me see if I can see the chat somehow again. So for chat, I have to see participants and then chat. Okay, right. 8 feet fence. Okay. 2 is top guard fence. Okay. Stop. Okay. Why 8 feet fence? Whoever has given answer for 8 feet, why 8 feet? Okay. Hard to easily cross. But it says it should deter the casual intruder. Hard for a 6 feet guy. Okay, average. All right, difficult for someone to climb. Okay, all right. So let me show you the answer here. It's 4 feet fence. And this is what you're going to see if you read in detail. There's a whole, how should I say, there are a whole lot of standards across the world in various countries around the designing of physical security. I am going to cover a couple of them. And you'll find the keyword here is the casual intruder. So 4 feet fencing is to deter the casual intruder. It is less expensive than taller fencing or top guard fencing. So if I show you the top guard fencing, this is the top guard fencing. It comes in 2 flavors. Basically, you can have either the barbed wire in a curved way, or you can have these angle irons with the straight barbed wire. So this is top guard fencing, and top guard fencing is always created on top of at least 8 feet height of wall or fence, which is considered as only 8 feet fence is without the barbed wire. Top guard is with this top guard, which is considered to be the most secure. So the most secured facilities, especially in military and for example, let's say your data center sites which are outside the cities, you will find that top guard fencing is the fencing used. But when you just want to it's a regional office in an office park, you can imagine that it's not a critical facility. It's probably where some admin work is going on. It's a small office, and the fencing that they're you trying to just casually avoid the intruder, a casual intruder. If you want to avoid, then you should opt in for a very cost-effective solution, which is 4 feet fence. Now, as I said, for fencing also, you might get some questions in the exam, and then these concepts need to be clear in your mind. Somebody day before yesterday posted a website link in our WhatsApp group, and I found about fences, gates, and windows. From that WhatsApp group, there was a mind map. So thanks to the person who shared that, and I proudly simply copied and pasted that mind map sections over here. These are good to know things. They might ask you about what kind of gates are used. Some options are given. They might want to ask you. I saw a question. I don't know whether it's a really a CISSP question or not, but it was on one of the websites. I was just doing some practice question, and it asked about the windows as well. That what kind of windows should be used. It was, tempered windows were, was the answer for that. So these are just good to know, and this will be included in this slide, so that when you go back and you try to revise in preparation of your exam, and I'm sure Jags and Yukti are going to probably include questions as well which are more relevant around these topics, so you can then practice. But I have just included them as a pointer here. I've not covered, I did not get any content to I had the content, but it would have taken a long time to cover the whole thing about windows and gates and fences. Okay, all right. Any questions till now? Why can't I see?
Nishant, I don't know. You raised your hand right now. I can unmute you for one question. Yeah. Yeah, Nishant. Okay. Rajiv, you go ahead. Maybe that was mistake or something.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So now let me just minimize this and minimize this. We are going to talk about the security design for selection of a particular site and how the process goes about. This is just my own creation of a sequence here, because I found one question around a sequence to be used in designing of the security, and looking at the answer, I created this content because the answer led me to the content. I do not know, whether it is mentioned in the books or not. So the first step is to have a team in place which need to work on that particular site design. If for all purposes within CISSP, I assume that when they talk about physical security design, they take it that you are going to design the site from the scratch. Okay, but most of us are working in offices, so our sites are already ready over there. So probably this session will trigger some thoughts in your mind in terms of are there any physical security related vulnerabilities in our offices or our locations, in our regional offices, in our data centers. So that's the whole objective. But for exam purposes or for CISSP purposes, we will always take up that the CISSP professional is going to design the site from the scratch. So obviously there has to be a team who is going to work on the design. The team needs to first do the risk assessment, RA's risk assessment. Then there has to be risk management process. I think we have already covered the entire risk analysis, risk assessment, and risk management processes in detail in our initial classes, in our initial discussions, but we will talk a bit more about them. Then you have to select the site, what kind of site or which place, which as you remember that in the first slide we said that our fort is located on the top of the hill, and that's how our Raja Maharajas used to always create their forts to protect the royal family, always on the top of the hill. It was never in the middle of a slum or something, which is surrounded by a lot of population and things like that. So as I said that physical security is a vast topic, and there are certain design standards which are applicable, and there are laws in various countries. So we are going to touch upon briefly in US and UK. And then we are going to, okay, Himani Rawat raised hand. Himani, can we unmute Himani? Himani? Okay, maybe that was through mistake. All right. So the first piece that we are going to cover is the combination of the first three boxes. The first one is team, this particular portion. Now, only an insider knows the vulnerabilities best. and only an insider has got the best shot at exploiting those vulnerabilities. Um, so basically, in Indian mythology, they say "Ghar ka bhedi lanka dhai." So the person who is the insider, he has the maximum knowledge about what all vulnerabilities are in place. So what we suggest here is that when you start your physical security design project, you should have that person, all the insiders on your side, so that you can ask them to spill out all the beans. They should be able to tell you what all possible weaknesses can be exploited when we design the site, and so that you have already taken care of them. And tomorrow, if these insiders become intruders due to being disgruntled employee or some other enmity or any malicious intent, they are not able to exploit those vulnerabilities. So it is very important that management, internal employees, and the consultants, when we say internal employees, it should not only be the physical security guy or the guy who's going to be in charge of let's say guards and all. There should be some kind of focus group discussion even with the people who are going to operate day in and day out, who are going to work as security professionals during the normal operations. So only then your complete assessment of all possible threats and vulnerabilities is available to you. Once you have that list, then obviously your risk analysis becomes a bit easy. Okay, so in risk assessment or risk analysis, what do you think are the steps? Can we have in the chat? What are the various steps in risk analysis? Quantitative risk. So that's just a term here, quantitative risk assessment. I'm saying the steps: asset classification, identify the asset, identify threat. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So identify your assets and classify them as per their criticality, right? Then obviously what would be the impact to your business if the asset is lost? So with the help of the security staff, you should be able to identify all the possible threats to your assets. Okay, and also the likelihood, probability. Excellent. Yes, probability, impact and probability. So impact and probability will give you the risk rating. Okay, excellent. Risk appetite. Okay, risk appetite will come in the next section here, which is acceptable risk level and level of protection with management. So we'll continue on the chat. Why can't I see the chat? Participants. Risk monitor. Okay. Yeah. Right. So we are going to evaluate if these, risk control. Sagar, very right. The existing risk controls which are or available controls is Sandeep. Thanks, Sandeep, for mentioning that, and welcome. So evaluate the existing controls. Are they able to handle these threats, which the list that we have got over there, right? And also this can be used to evaluate the risk analysis if the facility is already in existence. Okay, all right, yeah, we can stop on the chat. You can stop writing. Thanks, thank you. Okay, so you are going to calculate the risk rating against each asset and its each threat. So once you have the risk ratings in place, you will be involving your management. You will present all the risk in a heat map and take the decision to either accept, mitigate, avoid, or transfer the risk as per your risk appetite, as somebody said in the chat. Thanks. So, and wherever your management says you have to mitigate the risk or avoid the risk or transfer the risk, you will design the appropriate level of protection and or let's say the appropriate control, which is balancing between your organization physical security objective and the budget as well. Okay, so 3 steps. You put the team together, you do the risk analysis, the team does the risk analysis, presents it to the management, and as per the risk rating and the risk appetite, the management will say avoid some of the risk, mitigate some of the risk, or transfer some of the risk, or avoid some of the risk. So we will see that, but before we go there, there is one critical term in CISSP which is called critical path analysis. So I just wanted to highlight it here. I have created it as per my own understanding. I spoke to some very, how should I say, important physical security consultant or a person who has worked in physical security. And he told me over the call what this concept is, and then I created a couple of slides on that. Okay, so we just talked about the defense in depth concept where various levels of protection, you know, you have the site perimeter, you have the level 1, level 2, level 3. I've just named them. So you can assume that site perimeter has, is the first layer where the intruder is going to walk in. Okay, so let's first start where most of our people walk in. They walk in from the front gate. Okay, entry from the front gate is the most common path to reach the critical asset. So one has to first do certain checks. He has to present, identify, authenticate oneself on the front parameter. Then one has to again go to the next level. Maybe you will need to put a pin or a access card here for the level 1. Well, to cross level 1, then level 2, level 3, level 4, and then finally level 5. So the point here is, and this is what normally most of the people only concentrate upon, this particular line, reaching from site parameter to the most critical asset. It is, if somebody tries to cross all the levels here, it will be the most secured access, which means the person who has crossed all the 5 levels, he is the most authorized. You can trust that yes, he is authorized to reach this or access this most critical asset, number 1. But number 2, this is the most time consuming as well. It will take him the longest time to reach from front door to the critical asset. Okay, let's see another access now. You still have the same facility here, but now somebody is entering from the material gate. Okay, you remember the back door that I spoke about in the first slide, and in fact it was also mentioned in Rahul Kamath's session last week. Back doors are normally, and somebody said it's an escape route in the chat. Escape route means it is devoid of security. Normally backdoor security is not a primary concern, because all our visitors, all our top leadership, they walk in from the front door, and we want to showcase to Narendra Modi ji and Yogi ji that our hospital is working fine, everything. So the front door access is the most decorated one. The back door access is normally the one which is not given so much of care. Okay, as we say in CISSP, hardening of security at back doors is not a pre-thought as much as required. So what happens is, normally if somebody comes from the material gate, he is given a direct access to the secured access level 2. He does not need to get any clearance on level 1. I'm just taking it as an example here. So for example, he will be reaching the elevators directly to level 2 if he enters from the material gate, and then he can reach level 3, vault, and the most critical asset. Here you can see that the time taken by the person to reach from material gate to the most critical asset is lesser as compared to the person who was the authorized person and he came from the front door. Okay, I would. This also reminds me of the concept, you know, where people take advantage of the back door, and thieves and you might have seen in movies and everywhere that the back door is normally found to be unlocked, and people are able to enter and break in from there when at night and so on. Okay. Back into the chat. What do you think could be, apart from the front door and back door, is there any other possible way to breach into the security or access the security? Let's go back to the chat. Airdrop, windows, parking. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, let's stop for the airdrop here. Okay, let's stop. Thanks a lot. AC that. So guys, I would ask all of you to look at the chat, because these are the things which are coming apart from the content that I have created. This is going to give you a lot of thoughts, and this is the interactivity that I was looking for. So AC duct, parking areas, windows, and what I have shown here is from the rooftop. Okay. So does anyone remember, or can anyone identify what this scene is? MI6. Yes, this is Tom Cruise. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So this is Tom Cruise, and he is trying to breach the security because when he discussed with his gang or team that there are so many security levels which are impossible to breach, and why they are impossible to breach, because some CISSP professional designed it in such a fashion that if anybody wants to come through the front door, it is almost unbreakable. So what he decided was to take care of or utilize this particular vulnerability from the rooftop, and he is going to breaking through the window, right? So this is all we are talking about. I think now by now you would have got the idea. This is the quickest way to the critical asset, and it can lead you to the critical asset in less time, and all your investment in site perimeter fencing, CCTV, level 1, level 2, level 3 goes for a toss. So this is critical path analysis, and this is what this person told me, that when you design, normally people, when they talk to their contractors to design the site, they talk about the front gate and maybe a bit about the back gate, but other possible entry points should also be looked into. Now, one particular thing that I wanted to bring to your notice here was the technology convergence. Okay, this term is very important. Now what happens is, as you go from site to level 1, level 2, level 3, you'll find normally at level 2, level 3 a lot of technologies converging. Your wires for your how should I say, internet, for your telephones, to your security alarms, your fiber optic. So all of that is converging. All the wires are going to converge in a wiring closet, and those wiring closets are normally either at level 2 or level 3. We are going to see the wiring closets in our coming slides as well. But this technology convergence, if it, wherever it happens, it is very important to protect these points, so that a normal intruder, any intruder, when he comes here, authorized or unauthorized access, should not be able to simply find it open and easily openable, and he's going to cut it with a cutter, and all your technology goes for a toss. You will lose your CCTV access, you will lose your fax, you will lose your internet, you will lose all your communication. Okay. So in a nutshell, I think what I'm trying to say here is that why you do critical path analysis is because it requires that all possible paths of physical entry should be evaluated for possible security, from entry doors, emergency exit doors, windows that somebody said, glass windows, walls, and in most of our environment we have only glass. Glass walls, I would say, there are no windows, but glasses are easily shatterable. But now you also get bulletproof glass and things like that. So the ventilation system, somebody said AC ducts. So that's what we need to take care of. All right. Okay. Now we have covered these three things, which is a team, risk assessment, and risk management. And I think people normally say, our elders as well as our mentors here have told us that, if you invest more time in planning, you will spend less time in fighting. So it says 60 to 70% of your total project time should be spent on these three activities. And only then you should move to the next step, which is the selection of the site. Okay. Now site selection, whatever is the security need, I think we just talked about in the quiz about one site, which is a office park. So it did not require that much of security, but some of the sites might require, due to heavy machinery, they should be away from populated areas. They should be visible or should not be visible. We don't know. They should be away from places where you can have tsunamis. So you can see that it's not advisable anymore to locate your critical physical sites in the areas which are near to sea, and there could be sea waves and things like that. Okay, but then despite best efforts, sometimes it is not possible to avoid these things at all. But and we are actually seeing, for example, all our sites now that we invested in so much, you and me, everyone is working from home. So these sites are lying vacant, right? So the pandemic has rendered these choices a null and void. Okay, another quiz time. It's not a quiz, but feel free to write into the chat. What do you think this picture is about? Can you hear me? This picture, sorry, let me just bring it here. This picture, does anyone know anything about this picture? Oil refinery, Jamnagar, site of Ambani, Reliance. Absolutely right. So this is the Jamnagar refinery of Dhirubhai Ambani. Okay, what is the story behind this picture? Just one line. What natural disaster it was trying to take care of? Earthquake. Okay, how much Richter scale? 7 was the previous history. And what was the choice of Dhirubhai Ambani? On what Richter scale tolerance he wanted to make it? 8. Excellent. Thanks, Umesh. I will minimize the chat. So see, this is what it is all about. When you select your site, so Dhirubhai Ambani asked, uh, he came to know that the Jamnagar area is an earthquake prone zone. So he simply asked what was the last highest level of earthquake that it tolerated or it experienced. And they said, Mukesh Ambani and everyone said it is 7. So Mukesh Ambani said, let's make it 7 tolerant. Dhirubhai Ambani said, no, let's make it 8 tolerant. And it was a decision between, it was a trade-off between making it 8 tolerant and few thousand crores of rupees. But Dhirubhai Ambani said that I want to make it 8 tolerant. And then the rest is history. Everybody knows within an year of commissioning of this refinery, there was an earthquake which which was measured as 8 on Richter scale. And then Dhirubhai Ambani, I don't know whether this is true or not, but Dhirubhai Ambani apparently called Mukesh Ambani and said, tell me beta, who was right. But then again, the point that I'm trying to make out here is when you select your site itself, you have not put any physical control till now. Whatever you have done is on paper, but when you're selecting the site itself, you have to take care of, what all kind of natural disasters can take place and whatnot. Okay. So now we have seen that, there are a lot of things we have already accumulated on paper, and there is a lot of wisdom which is available thanks to the local news and the meteorological department and our management like Ambani's and so on. Fortunately, in our age now, there is a lot of guidance available to us. And some of these guidance is more or less like a regulatory, where you can't I mean, when you erect your site, when you commission your site, the inspectors would come and they will certify that your site is safe from fire or safe from some other criterias. So 2 criteria that I was able to look into was one was crime prevention through environmental design. I'm not sure if anyone of you have heard about this or not. I studied about this for the first time. It is based on 4 pillars. One is of natural surveillance, then natural access control, maintenance, and then territorial enforcement. I'm going to give the link in my slide so that you can go through it. I think in exam they simply ask you, they mix up, they say natural, they will give you 4 options and one of the option would be wrongly worded. So natural surveillance would be written as let's say natural survival. So natural survival is not actually not natural surveillance. That will be googly for you. So you'll have to then probably go for one of the other things. Similarly, there is another standard in UK, which is security by design. And what these standards normally talk about is, the fire ratings that should be used in terms of your doors, in your walls, what type of construction materials you can use if you are making an office, if you're making a shop, if you're making even a residential property. What load rating should be able to handle at each floor, because in India, at least we have seen that, unauthorized construction, when the building reaches 5th or 6th floor, they crumble down. So the load rating has to be adhered to. The walls, their thickness, their heights, the doors, as I said, ceilings, floorings, HVAC, which is nothing but heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Power, what are the power requirements? Electrical power, what is the what kind of water sources should be there, and you should be following certain guide. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, here. Then sewage, you have to design appropriate sewage, because in our multi-level secure offices today, there are thousands of employees working, and washrooms and everything. The sewage has to be planned accordingly. Gas. So the hyperlinks that I have given is about the CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, and then defensible space. There's a book over there that you can go through. Okay, so we have covered 5 boxes, and as I said that in exam there can be question about the sequence, that when do you reach the management. So there would be some line items A, B, C, D option given, and then you'll have to choose the correct sequence, and then wherever the management is after these first 2 steps or before the site selection, you will have to click on that. Okay, so now the portion that we are going to cover is going to be a non-stop portion, which is implement and monitor the controls. Before we do that, are there any questions, guys? How to prevent 9/11 kind of attacks? Right. So Akhilesh, I think I'll just take up this question for everyone's benefit here. 9/11 attacks, I don't remember the name, but I think somebody covered in one of the previous sessions, where the concept of hot site or parallel site was given in business continuity and disaster recovery. I think it was done before Jagbee's session. It was done last week only, I think. So what happens is that geographically dispersed locations came into fashion after 9/11. A lot of multinational companies started creating their backup parallel processing units in places like India, China, Vietnam, and Japan, and so on and so forth. So that their operations is going in US, in UK, in Europe, as well as in Asian countries. So thousands of kilometers of geographical separation was given, and the sites were invested in such a way that people were working all the time at both the sites, so that in case of a 9/11, the business can resume from second site. Okay. So now we are going to look at the physical, non-technical and physical technical controls here. I think some of the controls you are able to see here, fingerprint or thumb scanners, you have pins, you have CCTV cameras, you have locks, you have keys, and so on. There are basically 3 broad classifications. We already saw one classification. See, this is the beauty of reading any book or course or standard. They keep on classifying in the same thing in various ways. So we saw earlier that the control can be deterrent, can be denying control, or a responsive control. Then the same controls can also be classified as administrative control, technical control, and physical control. So administrative controls are related to the management oversight, some kind of reporting, procedures, trainings, policy formation, and so on. Whereas technical controls obviously are based on technology. They help in executing the administrative control. They help in giving tangible shape to the administrative control. And obviously physical control, what I mean to say is a non-technical control, like fencing, lighting, locks, and so on. Okay. Further controls within these groups can be like preventive, detective, or corrective, as I said. This is, I wanted to share some of the recent surveys. I have seen that 40% of CEOs reported security breaches are caused by employee negligence, and employees sitting inside the physical security, the physical side. And 77% of our security professionals report that physical security is not optimized. Okay, so let's move on with our controls here. Okay, so these are the wiring closets, right? Can anybody tell what is the critical asset these wiring closets are trying to protect? Network, servers, power, server storage. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So you have, the critical assets are not only the servers as physical servers and switches and routers, even these wires. When I said technological convergence, all your communication is going through this big bundle of wires here. And if anybody is able to, if these wiring closets, or as we call them, intermediate distribution facilities, if these are left open, then you will probably find a day when somebody, even a rat, can enter and chew on these wires. So this is the how should I say, the symbolic diagram where you are sitting in your work area. In the wall there is a punch down block where the network cable goes in, and this network cable hidden through your walls and everywhere goes to the patch panel, which is nothing. These are the patch panels in this wiring closet. And this is a rack mounted hub. It's an old diagram, but this was the only one that I could find to display. Now, if we take this diagram into various floors, you will find that this is a very common and best practice, that these wiring closets should be located straight, one below the other or one above the other, so that you have minimum bends in the wire, you have the minimum, how should I say, length of the wire, and it's easier to secure it in a uniform fashion. I have given one more, how should I say, angle. The back side of this particular wall I have shown you here. You can see that one backbone is taking to the equipment room, another is the backbone fiber, then you are going to the telecommunication closet. So what could be the, how should I say, protection measures or security controls, physical controls that you can think of, we can put in place to protect these wiring closets? Duct locking, okay. Anything else? Overhead tray. Overhead tray is basically to give space and for, how should I say, clarity in terms of attending to faults on the wires. I'm trying to see if people go back to the initial slide where I said deterrent or denial. CCTV, yes. So CCTV can be monitored to see if anybody is trying to loiter around in this area where wiring closets are there. You should have door open sensors in case, yes, sensor based doors. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. And even physical inspection from time to time. So you should have guards patrolling these areas so that in case people are trying to, because these areas are quiet areas, people tend to stand there and take calls, or just spend some time there, which should be absolutely denied. Then also, these areas have to be kept clean. Yes, authorized ID is only permitted. I'm just going to minimize that. These areas have to be kept clean in terms of there should not be any water leakage, water spillage, coffee spillage, or dust gathering around these areas, because that can prove detrimental in the long run. And everybody knows that dust and water can actually prove very dangerous for our facilities, our communication equipment. Cable plant. Another term that you might find is cable plant management. So the diagrams that we saw earlier, if these diagrams are documented, numbered, labeled, and they are kept in a safe place, these drawings, this is nothing but your called cable plant management, and they will come handy whenever there is an alarm from anywhere. So you would know that at which place, at which spot exactly you need to send your guard, or you need to probably invoke another physical access control. For example, dropping down of a shutter, that that floor is locked. Some intruder has come into this floor, and you don't want that intruder to run away. Then you will lock it from both the sides. And if there is any fire related incident, then you can probably depute somebody immediately and zero down on that particular area. So it is important to keep the cable plant management drawings safe, not only safe, updated as well. So the one important piece that I have found in my experience of 27 years is that people normally have the drawings created when the facility is put in place, but they normally tend to upgrade the sites, add more workstation, more wires, but they don't update the cable management, cable plant management drawings. It should be updated. I know it is very difficult to keep them updated, but I think nowadays there are many automated tools where you can simply drag and drop and add workstations and routers and switches and floors and keep your drawings all the time updated. Okay, so very important. The next piece that we are going to look at is from physical security point of view is our server room and data centers. आज के business में server rooms and data centers are the most critical asset and should have the highest level of physical access protection. I don't think I need to speak more on that, why this is the most critical asset, but you'll find that if you recall the Tom Cruise slide, access to server rooms or data centers should be most difficult to breach. We discussed in domain 5 about various logical access controls, and those technical controls would be again mentioned here in this particular slide. Okay, the first principle deployed is to make these areas as secure as possible so that any human presence is kicked out. Now the photograph here on the left is, you can see there is a cage. Not every business can afford a data center in their own campus. So if you are housing your data center racks in a third party facility where you can rest assured that, you know, beyond your office people, other people will also walk on these tiles, then it is important to give another layer of protection by putting this cage outside and maybe a pin based or fingerprint based logical access control so that no unauthorized person can enter this thing. Okay. On the right, there are several controls. As you can see, we have temperature sensors so that in case there is any damage or how should I say, any increase in the heat which can prove damaging, any threat due to the heat, necessary alarms can be passed on to the control center. Door position, again, door sensors. Airflow, very much important so that the heat can escape from these airflows. You have smoke detectors, you have video cameras on top. We have humidity points exactly on the ducts where the air is coming out. Why? Because on those ducts, if air is cooler than the specified temperature range, we are going to see what that range is, then it might develop condensation. And enough lighting should be there, and it should be preferably motion controlled sensitive lighting so that in case there is nobody there in these aisles, then the lighting is off, and in case somebody just enters, then the lighting becomes on. Then you have water levels, not only humidity controls here on the top in the AC ducts, but also in the false flooring below. So that in case there is any flooding happening from the outside or is there any water spillage, that also can be sensed by this automated tool. Why? Because we are trying to remove the humans as much as possible. So in a given working day, there would be least possible human presence in these areas. So we can only bank upon our physical access control. Okay, now access to these server rooms and data centers can be through smart cards, which are nothing but our credit card size, magnetic strip, and integrated circuit chip cards. There's another flavor which comes in, which is the proximity cards, where these are passive devices having some radio frequency, low radio frequency transponders, which can become activated, and you know, you just pass through them or touch them on this particular proximity sensor, and it gets activated. In fact, I was going through one of the events, the smart cards, why they are not such, how should I say, bankable or very reliable form of physical access control. There was in North Carolina, there was a gym which had issued smart cards to its customers, and there was a security breach. Somebody from 2010 entered the gym in 2019. So you can imagine that, just issuing the smart card or an access card is not enough. You have to also retire them properly as defined in your security policies, so that this becomes effective. Intrusion detection systems. So intrusion detection mechanism is useful only if it is connected to an intrusion alarm. So which means that, when you go out of the data center room or out of your jewelry shop or the showroom that I showed in the first slide in Vancouver, you have to key in something, and the motion sensor devices, they all become active. Okay, so now they will detect that somebody is present there, but there is no use in case they cannot pass on that signal via long wire to a control room or the nearest police station or the near fire center or to your mobile. Okay, so these intrusion detection systems, they work in connection with the alarm system as well, and that alarm system has to be also secured in terms of, sometimes people find that when there is no power, then the alarm system doesn't work. So that has to be taken care of. You have to put UPS behind these systems. And then second is, sometimes there are false alarms, or people just cut those communication lines so that even if the motion is detected, the signal does not pass through to the nearest control room center. So those communication lines have to be continuously monitored through a thing called heartbeat sensor. So those of you who know the ping command, you have to continuously test by sending that ping command to these devices that the intrusion detection system is reachable. Only then this system is complete. So heartbeat sensor comes into place. Now all these accesses can also be abused in terms of masquerading and piggy banking. I think we covered them, but once again, to reiterate, masquerading is if you take up somebody else's identity card and you touch that identity card or swipe that identity card, you are masquerading. And piggy banking is that I touched my card, I opened the gate, and then I allowed you to enter. So to compensate any access abuse, the compensating control is through CCTVs. So CCTVs are used for many functions, and one of the function is that they are used as a compensating control. So going through the CCTV footage, you will be able to make out that Rajiv Gupta's card was swiped. Was it really Rajiv Gupta who entered or not? Is there something? Yes. Okay, yes. Thank you. Emanation security. Has anyone heard about blackouts in Venezuela? Blackouts in Venezuela. Okay, no. Due to power, absolutely. Yes, Praveen. Yes. So in Venezuela, apparently in 2018 and 19, there were week-long power outages, and the Prime Minister said that these are the sabotage attempts through emanation security. So what is emanation security? Or emanation concept, let me just tell you, our mobile phones, our UPSs, our monitors, our computer, they emit EMI. Okay, a plugged in laptop will emit EMI, and there is a team in Tel Aviv University which put together a piece of equipment of $3,000 in adjacent room, and they were able to copy and see the contents of the monitor of this computer from this room to the adjacent room. So they were able to see the parallel access only on the basis of EMI emitted in the adjacent room. You can imagine that how strong the EMI emanation is. It can even cross our walls, right? So this is a threat, and I think there was a project called Tempest, which was by US National Security, NSA, US National Security Agency. So Tempest is a formal field where they constantly study around producing countermeasures or controls to protect our assets from emanation threats. So the two concepts that we use, one is Faraday cage. So the Faraday cage is it's an EMI absorbing system. It's a metallic cage. And it has, I think, some kind of electrical things going through it, which absorb all the emanation which is coming from external and also from internal. So the internal emanation is not able to go out, and any external interference or invading attack is also stopped. So Faraday cage is one way to control from emanation security. Another is white noise. So white noise is something like, you know, random noise you generate. You are sitting in a let's say your data center or in a room where you're doing some sensitive work. You also have, you know, that your main computer or server is generating some EMI signals, which can be intercepted by somebody who's sitting in the adjacent room or outside. What you do is you also have certain devices who produce random noises. So the person who is sitting outside is able to intercept all the noises together, and he's not able to make out what is the actual noise, which is a critical sensitive data holding noise from your terminal. So this is the concept of white noise, and a combination of white noise and Faraday cage is used in the modern concept where we say it's a control zone. So wherever how should I say, Apple iPhones are created, or some Google apps are written, all those are happening, developments are happening in control zones where you have necessary protection against white noise and emanation threats. And in fact, there are certain systems also now, new age systems I was reading, which are coming as Tempest certified, which means they don't emit those EMI signals in the first place. So there are ratings given to them. You can Google them and find out. Okay, so I thought because we are doing physical security in digital era, these are some of the things that I can see currently in the technology world we are doing. You can see a contactless access control. One more time. So just through your Bluetooth of your mobile, you are able to access this facility. Another is hand wave turnstiles. So without touching your hand, how one can. So now you don't need to touch this particular reader. You can just wave your hand. You can pass through the turnstile. It's fast, secure, and hygienic. It's crazy, yeah. Okay, so we'll quickly come to the media storage facilities. I think we know what all media we are talking about. We have already covered the logical controls in terms of, you know, formatting of hard disk or demagnetization or destruction of optical disks and things like that. So beyond those logical controls, if you're storing your backup data anywhere in terms of tape drives, or even for that matter physical paper, I would say, or in police control rooms, you have the critical asset, information asset is your evidence. In your biometric labs, you have your test tubes and things like that. They have to be secured through proper labeling. You should keep them in locked cabinets. If they are not in locked cabinets, these rooms should be having all the necessary controls so that only authorized people can secure these media for your office. I don't know how many of us know where our office backup media goes, but I would probably want that go back and see what are the media storage access controls are exercised in our organizations. Building on the media storage, there is one very particular concept I wanted to bring here. Why? Because this was brought in before as well, that due to a lot of crime, cyber crime and all, it is important to retain the chain of custody for our critical assets like logs, audit trails, and any event which might require investigation through the investigative agencies and things like that in the event of a theft. So this is the chain of custody, which is a paper, and it should be, the control that I'm talking about here is that maintenance of this chain of custody from to when. In fact, I would like to mention here that in India also, the Indian Evidence Act 1872, now has been modified by Information Technology Act of 2000, which is called IT Act, where electronic evidence is admissible in court. So what I'm trying to make out as a point here is that the facility, wherever your litigation is going on in that particular country, one must be, as a CISSP professional, must be aware about the regulatory implications and what compliance needs are there to store the evidence. Restricted and work area security. So I think we spoke about the restricted areas in those slides. When we talk about Tom Cruise, you have level 1, level 2. Even on the roads, we find restricted areas like men at work. Basically, the restricted area is to ensure that there is no shoulder surfing, which means that no unauthorized visitor, casual intruder should be able to cross those areas and come to your shoulder and look at your terminal. That is called shoulder surfing. He should not be able to read what is on their screen. In case of more sensitive data protection, you should have floor to ceiling walls. You should not have only 6 feet cubicles. You should have floor to ceiling walls. You should classify your work area in terms of what level you are on, what classification is there. It's a restricted area, it's a data center. It should have double security mechanism or two-factor security mechanism. Visitor control is very important because most of the time it happens if when a person is coming from a third party and he's coming on a visitor's pass, and if he's coming for 3 months in continuation, the guards and everyone, they tend to become complacent, and they might allow these people to enter the facility without full checking. One term that I wanted to bring here is sensitive compartmented information facility, or SIF. This facility is completely normally metallic facility. It's like a box which protects it from ammunition threats, and it has all the communication lines secured. It is bulletproof and all. This particular photograph is depicting when it's supposed to be saying that this is apparently from the time when Osama bin Laden was being tracked by Barack Obama. So all those war room discussions were happening in a sensitive compartmented information facility. Okay, some of the utilities related controls are also mentioned. It talks about clean power. All our equipments require clean power because otherwise they may be subjected to certain interruptions from electricity point of view, and we use UPS to give clean power to our equipment. We deploy some surge protectors and power backup generators in terms of there is a failure of power on the primary connection. The threats we are trying to save us from, power interruption is coming under the top 10 cause of business interruption losses. And in 2011, the study in US alone showed that $80 billion is lost annually due to the power outages. So the power, these are some of the terms that we need to probably be aware from point of view of CISSP: blackout, brownout, SAG, and all. So blackout is a complete loss of power it may be due to weather condition or maybe failure at the utility providers end. Brownout is nothing, it's a prolonged low voltage. SAG is momentarily low voltage. Spike is momentarily high voltage. Surge is prolonged high voltage. Fault is a momentary loss of power, voltage as well as current, both. Inrush is a sudden surge of your power, which when you switch on your AC, you find that suddenly your lighting at home goes dim. That is due to the inrush current. Noise, we have already seen, emanation noise. Transient is also a form of noise disturbance, and ground is that you have to ground your electric circuit to the ground. It is an electrical thing. Okay. So to protect ourselves from all these interruptions, we have to use, as I showed you in the previous slide, UPS and other things to protect us. Quickly, there is a 2 seconds break at our office. What do you think is the scenario experienced by Ramesh here? Brownout. No, it's a fault actually. So as I said that when power is disrupted, power is, here it says all the computer screens flow flash and the light dims for a second or two. So this is a, for 1 or 2 seconds, normal supply comes immediately. It is called a fault. Yeah, I also thought it's a momentary, it's a small dip in the voltage. It's a brownout, but the answer says fault. Okay, HVAC. So we have heat, ventilation, and air conditioning. As I told you that in the room temperature, we have to maintain it between 15 and 23 degrees Celsius, that we have to remember, and the humidity between 40 to 60%. Why? Because if we go below 40%, it can lead to static voltage, and static voltage can create a lot of damages to our electrical equipments. And you can see that humidity below 40% can, create static voltage up to in thousands of volts. All right. And if the temperature is increasing, then 100-degree temperature can damage our magnetic storage devices and computer systems, and then peripheral devices. This, I think, is the last topic of our discussion here. This is a scene from Chennai floods, one of the data centers. It was flooded, though it was powered down, and engineers are taking selfie here. So positive drain concept for air as well as, for water and gas has to be deployed, in terms of that the flow of your air and water has to be away from your critical asset. All right. So positive drains have to, the drains have to be positive, whether it in to design the water drainage or to the gas. It has to be distant from the water sources and gas sources. The ventilation, as I said, should be checked with sensors for any moisture. There should be water sensors in the floor, and so that in case of flooding, you can come to know about that. Now, in the fire section, in the heat section, we have a fire, where what we are seeing here is that there are three things: oxygen, fuel, and heat, which can be controlled. If one of these is cut off, then the fire can be controlled. So that control mechanism can be through right training, through right way of storage, right kind of design, and right kind of equipment rating that we can put. We can have heat detectors, we can have flame detectors, we can have smoke detectors, and we can put some fire extinguishers in place, which are class A, which is for the normal combustion, class B to take care of any fire related to liquids, class C for electrical fires, and class D for metal fires. So to suppress the fire, we have three types of system here: wet pipe, dry pipe, and pre-action. Wet pipe has water in the pipes all the times. Dry pipe does not have the water all the time. And the pre-action, as you can see here, it gets activated only when there is a fire detection by this smoke alarm. So right now there is no water here, but now you will see that water, as it is detected, the water, this valve opens, it goes there and it douses the fire. Deluge is when you have big pipes and you need to douse the fire because you are using a lot of fire flammable material in your site. The cylinders that we use as fire extinguishers, normally we use FM200 as the most preferred one, because halon cylinders were banned way back in 1987 and 1994. So these are various fire extinguishers. FM200 is a gas-based fire suppression. It's most safe, whereas argon, aero-K, carbon dioxide related cylinders, they all are considered to be dangerous to human life. Now, this is very important. I will probably not ask you, I will just give you straight away the answer here. Remember, human life takes precedence over any other item. Okay, in case you detect a fire, the first step needs to be taken is you have to advise all the individuals to leave. Everything else is important, but human life takes precedence over any other protection. And also, as I said, heat and water can provide damage to your equipment. Smoke can develop as carbon smoothing. Water and soda acid can cause short circuit when you try to switch on your equipment after 3-4 days. And one more important thing is that the firefighters who come into our building, they normally use axes and other heavy machinery to break and damage the stuff around to douse the fire or to locate the fire spots. Hence, it is very important to take into consideration that these guys are going to also damage when the fire is detected and it is being controlled by firefighters. Lastly, the perimeter security control. This is just the last slide. I'm sorry, it is taking more than 90 minutes because a lot of material is there.
Don't worry, sir. We are used to.
Okay.
The whole session has extended. So yeah. I can give you 10 minutes buffer. So no worries. You can.
Right. Thanks. So as we can see, the perimeter control should have, fences. You can see the fences. These are the turn tiles. This is the lighting arrangement, and everybody now is clear that lighting is very much important so that anybody trying to sneak into the perimeter can be detected easily. Security guards and security dogs. If somebody asks which is the best form of responsive control, physical access control, it is security guard. Why? Because he is a human. He can take decision as per the situation at hand. He can stop. He can observe the intruder. He can overpower the intruder. He can take an action. He can make a call. He can do so many things which otherwise an automated system can do only this much, whatever it is programmed to do. But a security guard can take and change his decisions and act accordingly. So this is the best form of physical access control. You have keys and combination locks. Keys comes in different forms. You have double key protection. For example, in your bank lockers, you have different keys. One key is with the custodian, which is me, and another is with the bank manager. And only when the two keys are inserted, that is double asymmetric key control that is exercised here. Pins, access control, badges, issue of badges which have your identification photo so that any person can see whether you are the right person who's trying to access. Motion detectors, intrusion alarms we have seen. These are the secondary or compensating verification mechanisms like CCTV and the control rooms. Then we have talked about environment and life safety. Occupant emergency focuses on physical security, on human life security and the general security. So it has if your organization is a critical organization and it has a lot of focus on business continuity, then probably it will also have, as a part of business continuity, a disaster recovery plan in place and policy. And as a part of disaster recovery, occupant emergency or occupant evacuation plan, as they call it sometimes, also has to be created. Then, as I said, there are different standards available. Now, these standards that I have mentioned here are responsible for physical security. They say is also required for privacy obligations like GDPR and other things. Why? Because in GDPR, I don't remember what section was there. I think it was Article 24 and 32. I might be wrong. It talks about physical security and privacy requirements. So what I mean to say here is GDPR specifically mentions about have you positioned your computer screens away from windows to avoid shoulder surfing? Do you equip your screens, the computer screens, with those transparent sheets so that on a particular angle nobody is able to see what you're writing or seeing on your screen? So all those kind of things are required from compliance perspective as well. CCPA is California Consumer Protection Act, and there are other standards. I've just mentioned them here. They are freely available on Google. So when you have access to these slides, you will be able to go through them at your own convenience and at your own bandwidth and appetite. So that brings us to the showstopper. So I wanted to bring this up here is because somebody, when I was talking to another person in UK, and he mentioned Indira Gandhi's assassination and the attempt on life of Margaret Thatcher here. He said there were so many assassination attempts on Margaret Thatcher, and she received an anonymous note, I think in 82 or 81, where they said we need to be lucky ones. Assassination agencies who are trying to make attempts, they said, we need to be lucky ones. You, Mrs. Thatcher, you need to be lucky every time. And that is the fate of us CISSP professionals. The intruder needs to be lucky ones. We need to be cautious every time. So we can't take our jobs lightly. And with that, I think we have covered the 6 steps, some controls, and broadly about environment and life safety. If there are any last minute questions, we can probably take them now.
Rajiv ji, wow, what a show.